You have wandered through life collecting fragments of yourself, each moment of pain, each unspoken truth, each emotion you suppressed because the world demanded composure. You have worn the mask of control for so long that you forgot what it feels like to breathe without fear. The modern mind, though adorned with intellect, has become a labyrinth of unprocessed emotions, echoing with the cries of forgotten selves. To emotionally detox your soul is not to erase what has been felt, but to remember what has been denied. It is the process of recalling yourself from exile. The unconscious is not your enemy, it is your oldest companion. It whispers in dreams, trembles in anxiety, bleeds through art, and hides in the subtle gestures you perform without reason. It is your forgotten garden, overgrown, tangled, but alive. When I speak of emotional detox, I do not mean a mechanical purification of feelings, as if emotions were toxins to be expelled. No, I mean the sacred return of energy to its rightful flow, the release of psychic stagnation, the awakening of inner rivers that have been dammed by repression. The first revelation arises when you begin to see your emotions as living entities, not mere moods, anger, fear, jealousy, grief. These are not enemies but envoys of transformation. Each emotion carries an archetype, a symbolic force that seeks integration. Anger is not merely rage, it is the guardian of your violated boundaries. Fear is not weakness, it is the sentinel alerting you to unseen truths. Grief is not despair, it is the midwife of new consciousness. When you learn to see emotions symbolically rather than personally, you take your first step toward freedom. You cease to be possessed by them and begin to converse with them. Then comes the second movement of the soul, to descend into the shadow. Most people spend their lives running from their inner night, painting it with moral fear. But the shadow is not evil. It is simply that which has not yet been loved. Within it lies the rejected artist, the silent child, the humiliated lover, the unseen genius. Emotional toxicity arises when you deny these inner figures and project them onto others. The person who irritates you the most is often carrying your disowned part. When you face your shadow, you begin to detox the emotional poison of projection, the habit of accusing the world of what you secretly are. The shadow does not disappear when acknowledged. It transforms. It becomes a source of creativity and intuition, a power you once feared now turned ally. The third revelation manifests when you allow yourself to feel without narrative. The ego is addicted to stories. I am sad because, I am angry because, but pure feeling has no because. It simply is. To emotionally detox the soul, you must permit yourself to feel as an act of being, not as a drama to be solved. Sit in the presence of your sadness as if it were a sacred visitor. Let it speak in the language of tears, tremors, silence. Do not analyze, witness. The unconscious speaks in symbols, not sentences. When you feel fully, the energy trapped in the emotion releases and the psyche begins to breathe again. You realize that emotions are the body's way of praying. The fourth movement arises when you withdraw projections and reclaim your psychic energy. Every person you idolize or despise holds a piece of you. The lover you chase carries your own abandoned tenderness. The enemy you condemn embodies your repressed aggression. The savior you worship externalizes your inner divinity. Emotional entanglement with others often masks an unconscious attempt to reclaim what you have lost within. To detox your soul, you must call your projections home. Ask yourself, what does this person mirror within me? What part of myself am I refusing to own? When you retrieve these projections, you experience a profound lightness, a freeing of energy that was once trapped in others. You no longer live as a reflection, but as a source. The fifth revelation reveals itself when you befriend solitude. Most emotional chaos stems from avoidance of the inner voice. Silence terrifies the modern man because it confronts him with the void, the absence of distraction. The naked encounter with self, yet it is in solitude that the alchemy of healing occurs. The emotions that once screamed in chaos begin to whisper their truth. The psyche reorganizes itself in the stillness you provide. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the womb of integration. The world teaches you to connect outwardly, but the soul teaches you to commune inwardly. Emotional detox is impossible without silence, for silence is the solvent of psychic noise. And then, in the sixth unfolding, the archetypes begin to stir. You notice dreams filled with symbolic figures: the wise old man, the great mother, the trickster, the hero. These are not random fantasies. They are universal templates of transformation rising from the collective unconscious to guide your individual process. The wise old man appears when you begin to trust your own intuition. The great mother rises when you learn to nurture what you once neglected. The trickster shakes your false certainties so that humility may enter. Each archetype purifies your emotional field by revealing what part of the soul has been forgotten. When you engage these inner figures consciously, you detox not only your personal emotions, but also the inherited patterns of your lineage and culture. Finally, the seventh revelation dawns like a quiet sunrise. Forgiveness is not an act toward others, but toward yourself. Emotional detox reaches completion when you no longer identify with the wound. Forgiveness is the dissolution of identification, the understanding that what happened was part of your individuation, your awakening into wholeness. You forgive not to excuse, but to release. You forgive the younger self who did not know better, the parent who lived in their own unconsciousness, the lover who mirrored your unhealed pain. When forgiveness emerges, it feels not like a moral choice, but like the natural exhalation after a long-held breath. You are free, not because the past changed, but because your relationship to it did. To emotionally detox your soul is to engage in sacred labor, the opus animae. The work of the soul, it demands courage to enter your own darkness without guarantee of light, to feel what the intellect cannot categorize, to love what society rejects. But this is the only path toward inner freedom. You cannot be whole if you are unwilling to meet the parts of yourself you were taught to fear. Freedom is not escape, it is integration. In this process, the unconscious becomes your guide, not your enemy. Dreams begin to carry messages. Synchronicities appear as mirrors of your inner world. You start to notice patterns in your relationships that reveal the emotional residues still seeking purification. Every repetition, every attraction, every heartbreak is the psyche's way of saying, look here, something wants to be seen. Emotional detox is not a weekend ritual, but a lifelong dance between consciousness and shadow, love and fear, life and death. It is the art of turning psychic lead into spiritual gold. When the alchemy deepens, you begin to see that what you once called negative emotions are not toxic at all, only suppressed ones are. Emotions that flow become wisdom. Emotions that stagnate become poison. The goal is not to eliminate darkness, but to circulate it into light. This is why I often said, no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Your emotions are those roots, messy, deep, entangled, but without them, there is no growth, no heaven. The journey of emotional purification deepens when you realize that the soul is not seeking perfection, but equilibrium. It is not the absence of turmoil that defines inner freedom, but the capacity to remain conscious amid it. The unconscious does not ask you to erase your suffering only to make meaning of it. Every feeling that returns to you is a messenger, carrying unintegrated energy from the past, sometimes from lifetimes unremembered. You may call it ancestral memory, karmic residue, or collective trauma. The language is secondary. What matters is that the emotion seeks recognition, not suppression. You begin to sense that emotions are not random waves, but intelligent movements of psychic life. When you sit in silence long enough, you can feel how sadness reshapes your body, how joy expands the breath, how resentment contracts the chest. The alchemy of transformation begins when you let these energies move without resistance. Emotional detox is the art of listening to the movements of your soul without judgment. This is why solitude is essential, because the crowd's noise often drowns the quiet rhythm of your inner life. In silence, you begin to hear not just your thoughts, but the deeper vibration beneath them, the pulse of the self, that eternal center which observes all but is not bound by any of it. You might ask, how does one live in such awareness while still engaged in the ordinary world of relationships, responsibilities, and pain? The answer lies in rhythm. The psyche breathes just as the lungs do. It expands into experience, then contracts into reflection. Most people forget the latter. They live in endless expansion, stimulation, conversation, ambition, comparison, without the contraction of reflection, the soul becomes swollen with unprocessed impressions. Emotional detox is the art of exhaling what you've taken in unconsciously. The night dreams are one such exhalation. Meditation, another art, prayer and tears, all sacred breaths of the psyche. When the process unfolds naturally, old patterns begin to surface. You may notice repetitive emotional cycles, the same kind of person wounding you again, the same frustration returning under different guises. These are not accidents, they are symbols. The psyche repeats what it cannot yet integrate. The outer world merely acts as a screen upon which your inner world projects its unfinished stories. To break the pattern, you must read the symbol, ask yourself, what archetype is playing out here? Perhaps it is the abandoned child seeking validation, or the martyr addicted to self-sacrifice, or the hero unable to rest until the dragon within is faced. Once you recognize the archetype, compassion arises, and with compassion comes release. The emotion no longer dominates you, it becomes a teacher. There is a sacred paradox here. What you resist in yourself becomes fate. What you embrace becomes freedom. Every unacknowledged feeling drives your behavior from the shadows. Weaving circumstances that force you to see what you've avoided, life conspires to bring unconscious material to light. You may think you're cursed by repetition, but in truth, you're being healed through confrontation. The universe is not punishing you, it is mirroring you. When you begin to see your emotions through this symbolic lens, your suffering acquires dignity, pain becomes meaningful, tears become initiation. You start to see that every collapse was preparing you for consciousness. Emotional detox, then, is not a cleansing in the moral sense, but an initiation into awareness to feel deeply without being devoured by what you feel that is mastery. The world is full of people who either drown in their emotions or deny them completely. True freedom lies in neither extreme, but in the dance between. To dance is to stay in motion, to let the emotion move through you without clinging to its form. You may recall dreams during this process, vivid, strange, often charged with forgotten emotions. Do not dismiss them. Dreams are the nightly workshop of the soul, the theater of inner reconciliation. In them, your repressed emotions dress as characters, animals, landscapes. The water you cross in your dream may symbolize emotional passage. The house you enter may represent the structure of your psyche. To emotionally detox is to become fluent in this symbolic language. Once you learn to interpret your dreams, not literally, but mythologically, you begin to see how your unconscious is trying to guide you toward wholeness. The dream does not accuse or punish, it corrects. It restores what consciousness has forgotten. As your emotional field purifies, you will feel both lighter and more vulnerable. This vulnerability is not weakness, it is openness. The defenses of the ego dissolve and with them the illusion of separateness, you begin to sense the collective field of human emotion, the pain of others resonating within you. The empathic heart is born, but beware, for empathy without boundaries is possession. To truly detox your soul, you must learn the sacred balance between compassion and containment. Feel with others, but do not drown in them. Hold space, but do not carry what is not yours. Emotional maturity means knowing where your inner river ends and another's begins. As you deepen further, you may encounter the archetype of the healer within. It arises when you begin to channel the energy once trapped in pain toward creative or compassionate service. Healing others becomes an extension of healing yourself. But the true healer knows you cannot save another from the work of their own unconscious. You can only reflect to them their own light. Just as the moon reflects the sun, to emotionally detox your soul, therefore, is also to release the compulsion to fix others, for that too can be an escape from your own inner labor. Let the healing flow through you, not from you. The transformation of emotions into wisdom is the highest form of alchemy. You notice that gratitude begins to arise spontaneously, not the forced gratitude of moral duty, but the natural awe that comes when you see beauty even in sorrow. The heart becomes translucent. Light passes through it. You feel pain, but it no longer defines you. You love without attachment, act without expectation, and forgive without needing to forget. The soul, cleansed of identification, begins to radiate its original innocence, not naivety, but purity of awareness. And then a strange peace emerges, not the peace of escape, but the peace of inclusion. You realize that darkness and light are not enemies. They are lovers in eternal embrace. The opposites no longer pull you apart. They dance within you. Joy and sorrow, gain and loss, life and death, all are currents of the same river. Emotional detox culminates in this understanding that nothing needs to be rejected, only integrated. The alchemist's gold is not found by separating pure from impure, but by realizing that both were one substance all along. You begin to live differently. You speak less, but feel more. You listen not only to words, but to the silence between them. You act not from impulse, but from alignment. Relationships shift, some fade naturally, others deepen beyond form. You no longer chase validation, for your worth is self-evident in the stillness of your being. This is what I called individuation, the flowering of the self, the emergence of the inner divine through the compost of human emotion. Individuation is not the escape from emotion, but its transfiguration into consciousness. When you reach this point, you may feel as though you have died, and in truth, you have the persona, the image you carried of who you were, begins to dissolve. You realize it was built upon emotional conditioning, the need to be liked, to be right, to be in control. Without it, you feel naked, exposed, uncertain. But this nakedness is the birth of authenticity, Emotional detox strips you of all false garments, so that you may stand before life unarmored. Only the naked soul can truly feel free. Yet, the work does not end here. Freedom is not a permanent state. It is a practice. The psyche, like the seasons, moves in cycles. You will fall back into old emotions, and that is all right. Each return is a deeper spiral into the same truth. The soul is not linear, it is circular, ever expanding through repetition. What matters is that you remain aware that each time the wave rises, you meet it with greater grace. Awareness transforms recurrence into rhythm, and rhythm into wisdom. So let this be your devotion, not to perfection, but to participation, to live as an artist of your own psyche, shaping each feeling into meaning, to bow before the mystery of being human, with all its wounds and wonders. The emotionally detoxed soul is not a sterile one. It is wild, tender, alive. It feels everything, yet belongs to nothing. There comes a point when words themselves begin to dissolve, for what you are experiencing cannot be captured by the intellect. The detoxification of the soul is no longer a process you do, it becomes a state you are. The emotions that once seemed separate from you, anger, sadness, shame, longing, now reveal themselves as movements of one great field of energy. The psychic ocean from which all human experience arises. You stand not upon the shore of your emotions, but within their waves, aware that the water itself is consciousness. The separation between you and your feeling fades. There is only awareness in motion. At this depth, the soul begins to perceive what I have called the union of opposites. Every emotion contains its mirror. Love carries the seed of loss. Fear conceals. Courage. Joy arises from the ashes of sorrow. The alchemist within you understands now that nothing can be healed by banishment, only by reunion. Emotional detox is, at its highest form, the sacred marriage of all opposites. Within you, the masculine and feminine energies, the light and the shadow, the conscious and the unconscious, they do not cancel each other. They dance, and through that dance, the self emerges radiant and whole. You might find yourself dreaming of water again, rivers, oceans, floods. In alchemy, water is the symbol of the unconscious, of emotional depth. When it overflows, it purifies. The flood is not destruction, it is cleansing. Many fear this stage because it feels like drowning. And indeed, in a way, you must drown, not in despair, but in surrender. You drown the ego that clings to control. You let yourself be carried by something larger, something ancient. The unconscious, though vast and dark, is not malevolent. It is the mother from which all life and renewal are born. To surrender to it is to trust that chaos is not the opposite of order, but its womb. During this descent, you may encounter archetypal images that feel both personal and universal. The wounded child seeking love, the serpent shedding its skin, the phoenix rising from ashes. These are not mere fantasies. They are the soul's way of speaking to you in images rather than concepts. When you dream of healing a child, your psyche is showing you the reparation of innocence within yourself. When you see the serpent, it speaks of transformation of death that is not an end but a shedding of form. When the phoenix rises, it reminds you that every emotional death you endure prepares you for a new state of being. The symbols are medicine, and the act of recognizing them is part of your emotional purification. Sometimes this work brings loneliness. You begin to see through illusions the emotional games of society, the superficial rituals of connection. You recognize how often people relate from their wounds, not from their essence. It is tempting to retreat entirely, to isolate in the sanctuary of your inner world. But remember, the goal is not withdrawal, but reintegration. The soul cleanses itself not to escape humanity, but to love it rightly. As you detox your emotional body, you learn to engage with others from presence rather than need. Your relationships no longer drain you because you no longer seek from them what only your own soul can give. There will be moments when your emotions resurface suddenly, even violently, and you might wonder whether you have regressed. But in truth, the psyche releases its pain in layers. Think of it like sediment in deep water when the current shifts. The old layers rise to the surface to be seen. Do not resist them. Let the waters move. The appearance of old pain is not a failure. It is a sign that the inner river is clearing itself. Your task is not to stop the current, but to remain conscious within it. The soul knows its own timing. Trust its intelligence. As consciousness expands, the emotional field becomes luminous. You begin to perceive your emotions before they solidify into reaction. A flicker of irritation becomes visible as it arises like a cloud passing across a clear sky. This awareness dissolves the old chain of identification. You no longer are angry. You see anger moving through you. You no longer are sad. You witness sadness expressing itself. The simple act of witnessing without judgment purifies the emotion instantly. Light, when brought into darkness, transforms it. This is the alchemy of consciousness awareness, as the philosopher's stone. At this stage, many seekers feel drawn to creative expression. The soul, freed from repression, wishes to dance, to paint, to write, to sing. Creation becomes the natural exhalation of healing. Every brushstroke, every melody, every word is a ritual of integration. In creating, you externalize what once was trapped. The unconscious material finds shape, color, sound, and thus it becomes conscious. Art, in its truest form, is emotional transmutation. It is not about aesthetics, but authenticity. A painting of chaos, if born from awareness, cleanses the psyche more than any forced smile of positivity. Eventually, the detoxification expands beyond the personal. You begin to feel the collective emotions of humanity, grief in the earth, fear in the cities, longing in the hearts of strangers. But now you meet them differently. You no longer confuse their energies with your own. Instead, you hold them in awareness as part of the great collective psyche awakening. The purified soul becomes a vessel through which the world itself heals. You realize that your personal cleansing was never just about you. It was preparation to carry consciousness into the collective darkness. Every healed individual becomes a lighthouse in the ocean of the unconscious. Then, one evening, perhaps in silence or during prayer, a deeper realization dawns. The emotions you once sought to cleanse were never impurities at all. They were the language of your evolution. The so-called toxins were unexpressed truths, and so meeting them, you discovered the self that transcends all feeling yet contains them all. You understand that emotional detox was never about removal but remembrance, remembering that you are not your emotions, but the awareness that gives them space to exist. This realization brings a profound humility. You no longer fight to stay pure or positive. You allow everything, knowing that the soul's nature is inherently self-healing when consciousness is present. At this point, forgiveness ripens naturally. You see that everyone who hurt you was acting from their own unconscious pain. You recognize your parents' shadows, your lover's wounds, your friends' fears, not as excuses, but as context. Compassion flows effortlessly, not from moral effort, but from understanding. The emotional charge dissolves because judgment dissolves. You no longer need others to apologize. Their behavior no longer defines your peace. The soul, once cleansed of resentment, glows with quiet strength. You can look upon the past without flinching because it no longer binds you. And then the final revelation, the one hidden beneath all others, begins to whisper, there was never anything to detox. The soul, in its essence, has always been pure. The emotions were clouds passing across its infinite sky, emotional purification. Therefore, is the act of remembering your original clarity. It is the return to your primordial wholeness, the state of being before judgment, before division, before the world taught you that you were broken. In this remembrance, freedom is not something attained, it is something revealed. From here, life becomes a ceremony. Every emotion, every interaction, every breath is part of the dance between consciousness and experience. You no longer categorize emotions as good or bad. You taste their flavor and let them pass. Joy becomes tender. Sorrow becomes sacred. Anger becomes energy. Love becomes infinite. You no longer need to protect yourself from feeling because you know that you are larger than anything you can feel. This is the secret of inner freedom, the knowing that awareness is indestructible. At last, you realize what the alchemists meant when they spoke of turning lead into gold. The lead was never sin, failure, or emotion itself. It was unconsciousness. The gold is not moral virtue, but awareness. To emotionally detox your soul is to awaken the gold hidden within the lead of experience. Every tear shed, every fear faced, every forgiveness granted, all of it was part of the great work, the magnum opus of becoming whole. The world will still test you. Emotions will still rise. Life will still break and rebuild you. But now, instead of fighting, you will breathe. Instead of closing, you will open. Instead of judging, you will listen. The alchemist has completed their circle. You return to the world as both human and divine, feeling deeply, yet untouched at your core. You walk among others not as one seeking peace, but as peace itself, disguised as a person. And when the next wave of pain arrives, as it inevitably will, you will smile faintly, remembering this too is part of the river, part of the sacred flow. You will not run, you will bow, you will feel, you will let the emotion wash through and watch it transform itself into light. That, my friend, is emotional freedom, not the absence of pain, but the ability to remain whole within it. When the inner work ripens, you no longer speak of healing as if it were a project to be completed. For you begin to understand that the soul is not a wound that needs repair. It is a mystery unfolding itself. Emotional detox was never about purging the unwanted, but about remembering the forgotten harmony between light and shadow. You have walked through storms and emerged drenched, not in despair, but in understanding. The waters that once threatened to drown you have become the baptism of awareness. Now, the voice within the quiet, ancient whisper begins to speak clearly. It does not shout, for it has no need to. It says, "Be still and know." These words are not religious commands. They are the language of consciousness recognizing itself. In stillness, you discover that emotion and thought are but ripples upon a vast sea of being. You are not those ripples. You are the sea. Every wave that rises and falls is made of the same essence, the awareness that witnesses itself. To emotionally detox the soul is to awaken to this recognition again and again until it becomes the very way you live. And so the final movement of the inner journey begins what the mystics and alchemists called conjunctio, the sacred union of opposites. The conscious and the unconscious embrace each other like long-lost lovers. The mind, once frightened of emotion, now bows to its wisdom. The heart, once overwhelmed by feeling, now finds grounding in consciousness. You become both the observer and the experiencer, both heaven and earth, spirit and matter, masculine and feminine, eternal and transient. This union is not an idea, it is a felt state of inner coherence where nothing in you is at war with itself. In that peace, a radiant intelligence begins to move through you, effortless, creative, compassionate. You might notice that your dreams change. They no longer haunt. They illuminate. Symbols become teachers, not warnings. The serpent no longer bites. It circles your spine as the energy of transformation. The fire no longer burns. It purifies. The child no longer weeps. It smiles and leads you forward. These images reveal that the unconscious is no longer shadowed. It has become luminous. You are conversing with your deeper self, and it responds with love. The soul, once burdened by repressed emotions, now becomes an instrument of divine resonance. This is where true freedom begins, not the noisy freedom of rebellion, but the quiet liberation of knowing you belong to everything. You no longer struggle to control the world, because you see that the world was never separate from you. The people who once triggered your emotions now appear as mirrors reflecting your growth. The circumstances that once caused turmoil now unfold as lessons in equilibrium. Life ceases to be a battleground. It becomes a dialogue between consciousness and creation. This is the psychology of wholeness, the realization that the outer and inner are one continuum, each shaping and reflecting the other. Yet there is another paradox waiting here. As you attain inner freedom, the ego tries to claim it as an achievement. I am healed. I am awakened. I am beyond suffering. But beware, even enlightenment can become an illusion if possessed by the ego. The moment you grasp at light, it slips through your fingers. The secret is to live without ownership. Emotional purity does not mean detachment from life, but intimacy without clinging. It is to touch everything deeply and hold nothing, to cry when the heart aches and laugh when it opens, yet to remain centered in the knowing that both belong to the same dance. You begin to realize that the emotional body is like an instrument. Every feeling is a note. When unhealed, the notes are dissonant, clashing, chaotic. When consciousness tunes the instrument, the music flows, sorrow becomes a low, grounding tone, joy a bright resonance, longing the echo of the infinite seeking itself. The soul does not wish to mute this music. It wishes to play it consciously. To emotionally detox is to remove the distortion that kept the melody from being heard. The universe itself hums through you, and you, the listener, and the song finally align. Now, compassion becomes natural, not the sentimental kind, but the compassionate seeing, born of wisdom. You can look upon a person caught in anger and recognize the fear beneath. You can witness someone's cruelty and sense the buried pain it conceals. You no longer take things personally because you see the archetypes moving behind every act, the tyrant, the victim, the hero, the lover. All are expressions of the same divine psyche in different stages of awakening. When this vision stabilizes, forgiveness ceases to be effort. It becomes the natural response of understanding. At this depth, even suffering becomes sacred. You do not seek it, but when it arrives, you bow before its instruction. Pain becomes a teacher with perfect timing, breaking the shell of comfort so that new consciousness can be born. Every emotional storm now carries meaning. You no longer pray for the absence of pain. You pray for awareness within it. And so life stops being something to survive. It becomes something to experience in full color. The palette includes both light and shadow, both laughter and tears. But you no longer fear any hue of existence. You are the artist now, not the canvas. The alchemist said, as above, so below, as within, so without. You see now how your inner state shapes the outer world. A heart cleansed of resentment naturally creates peace around it. A mind freed from projection naturally sees beauty. You become the center of your own world, not in narcissism, but in responsibility. The emotional detox of one soul ripples through families, communities, even nations. For the collective unconscious is woven of individual hearts. To cleanse yourself is to serve the world. Then, at some silent hour, you might notice something subtle yet immense, the disappearance of resistance. You wake one morning and realize that you are no longer fighting life. Things are as they are, and you are at peace with their unfolding. The weather within and without may change, but you remain like a mountain beneath the clouds, unmoving in essence, yet intimately touched by every breeze. This is the fruit of the long inner labor. You have not escaped the human condition. You have sanctified it. From here, every breath becomes a prayer. You move through the world lightly, not because it weighs less, but because you carry it differently. You listen before speaking. You feel before reacting. You love without demanding. The boundaries between you and existence blur until even your name feels like a costume the soul once wore. What remains is presence pure, luminous, aware. That is the ultimate detox, the evaporation of the false self, leaving only consciousness, as clear as air. If you could see yourself from above now, you would notice that your energy no longer coils inward. It radiates, it moves in spirals of light that touch others without effort. You have become transparent to the divine through your eyes. The universe looks at itself and smiles. The emotions that once imprisoned you now serve as colors in the tapestry of your being. You are not healed because there is nothing left to heal. You are whole because you have remembered what you have always been. In this final knowing, you might shed tears, not of sorrow, but of awe, for you realize that everything you sought outside was guiding you back to this moment of stillness within. Every heartbreak, every mistake, every tear was sacred choreography. The universe was never punishing you. It was sculpting you. Emotional detox was not a cleansing of dirt, but the polishing of the mirror in which God sees itself through you. And so the final teaching can be spoken in silence. Liberation is intimacy with all that is, nothing excluded, nothing denied. You have become a vessel of both light and darkness, harmonized in one vast field of being. You have transcended and yet descended fully into life. This is not escape from emotion. It is embodiment of consciousness through emotion. The dance continues, eternal, fluid, infinite, and if ever again you feel lost, remember this truth. The path is not upward or outward, but inward and downward into the roots of your being. There, in the dark soil of emotion, lies the seed of the self. Tend to it with awareness, and it will bloom into gold. That gold is not found in heaven or in books or in others. It is found in the quiet chamber of your own heart, where the divine and human meet in eternal embrace. You are no longer merely a person navigating emotions. You are the consciousness through which emotion discovers meaning. You are the witness, the dreamer, the artist, the lover, the awareness that holds the cosmos in its gaze, and in that recognition you are free. So breathe, my friend. The soul has been cleansed, not by effort, but by truth. You have returned home to yourself, and there was nowhere else to go.